Well, good to see everyone this morning. Yes, as was mentioned, we had a wonderful holiday, and you will hear a little bit about it in the talk as well. As a preacher, you endlessly find preaching examples in life as you walk through life, and so you grab them when they're there. We've been, as a church, we've been looking at this letter, 1 Corinthians, and we've had we're coming to a pause at the end of this week, and then over the summer we're going to be looking at the 1 Corinthians 13 and what love is, and then we'll come back into the letter. And actually, where we've got to today, there's a bit of a break anyway. Paul sort of comes to a bit of a full stop before he moves on to something else. It's been a little bit, no, it's not been difficult, has it? But it's been great teaching, but it's covered some quite real issues. And there's been a lot of conversation around things, and I've listened to the talks while I was away, and just the whole thing that, there's bits, we've gone into whether you can eat food sacrificed to idols, and some question, and it felt a little bit like a question and answer session Paul was running through. I feel for this morning just to try and bring a little bit of a summary of where Paul ends up, and it's his question, why? It's felt like Paul's focused a lot on the what, and the what do you do, and how do you do it. But if you've done anything in terms of business development, if you've done anything around leadership development, there's a big push more recently. Someone like Simon Sinek is an example. Actually, the importance is not the what or the how, but the why. Why do this? And I want to focus in on the why. Why? Why has Paul been focusing in on all of these things? Why are these things important? And it's not that they're important because it's about behavior. It's not about behavior. It's not about us behaving rightly necessarily. It's not about looking good or looking acceptable. It's not about us looking clean and tidy. It's not about, as I talked about for those who were here a month or so ago, about having a clean house to show off. Why is Paul doing this? And it's really quite simple. And a bit of a misleading there. I've put 1 Corinthians 10. In fact, I'm only going to speak on 3 verses at the end. But why do this? Well, as Peter writes in 1 Peter 1, as obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. That's one of the fundamental reasons. Why do all these things? Why respond to all these different things around behavior, about how we behave, how we act? Because God is holy, and he calls us to be a holy people. You see, our holiness, as we'll see, brings him glory. Our behavior glorifies him. How we act, our actions help others to worship him, but also to find him. I remember my mum, who sadly passed away a number of years ago, when she was working, she had a work colleague. I can't remember his name, so I can't even get, so let's call him Fred. She had a work colleague called Fred, who was a Christian. My mum found him the most obnoxious, rude individual. And no matter what I said, she would say, but how could a person like that follow Jesus? If that's what a Christian's like, then I want nothing to do with it. Our behavior matters. Our actions matter. And as we'll see, we can have an impact for the good, but sadly for the negative on people in the way that we are and the way that we behave. And I never actually knew that individual, so I can't comment on whether my mum was right or not. But it stopped her finding Jesus because of one individual and his behavior. So what are the three verses I want to look at? They're at the end of this section. 1 Corinthians 10:31. And as Rob's mentioned, there's some other great verses, but I'm just looking at these last three verses and into the beginning of chapter 11. So after Paul's done all this teaching around, can I eat this, can I eat that, can I eat the food that's been sacrificed to an idol, all the questions around sexuality and so on. He sums it up basically like this. So, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it for the glory of God. That's his summary. And that's what I want us to think about. Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God. You see, we could get caught up in all the legalism. Is it right for me to do this? Can I get it? And if we're honest, legalism, actually, the question around legalism is more about, can I get away with this? Rather than is it a right thing to do, if we're honest. It's how far can I push the boundary and still be okay? That's often where legalism is about, but that's completely the wrong question. So we could get caught up in all the legality around food and whether we eat food. And this chapter covers some of that. Can we eat food? Now, we don't necessarily have food sacrificed to idols, but we could have the same debate around halal food or kosher meat, because they're religious meats in a sense. But Paul is basically saying, don't get caught up in all of that. That's not the question. The question is your action glorifying God? And Beth showed us a couple of weeks ago when she talked about, actually, is my action loving and kind? Is it helpful to someone else? Not, can I get away with this? You see, legalism is quite self-centered. It's around what I can do. Can I do this? Am I allowed to do this? Can I get away with this? Whereas actually, Paul is saying here, it's not about you. It's about God, and it's about others. Does what you do bring glory to God? And as we'll see, does it also impact positively other people? And so rather than asking, can I get away with this? The better question is to ask, does this glorify God? Is this action, is this decision, is this thing I'm about to do, will it bring God glory? And if it doesn't, there's a good barometer, don't do it. Step back. The other question you could ask, and I think Beth mentioned it, is this action loving and wise? Is it a loving action? Does it show love? Does it demonstrate love? Is it loving towards others? And is it wise? God's given us wisdom to think, and I think, again, Beth mentioned this quite a bit. Both of Beth and Rob's talk are now online on our YouTube channel, so if you've not seen them, do catch up with them. But that's the question to ask. Is it a loving action rather than is it a right action? I was trying to think of some examples, and it's quite a difficult one to, what examples could I give? Maybe you could have the workman comes in and says, hey, if you pay me in cash, it will be 50 quid. Is that a loving, you could then ask the legality, am I allowed to do that legally, or am I allowed to do that morally? But actually, the question really should be, does that action glorify God? By giving and therefore avoiding all the legalities around tax and so on. What about this one? Saying a little white lie to keep the peace. We've probably all done that, haven't we? But is that a right? And again, we could talk. Is it right? But does that glorify God? Is that loving? It may feel loving in what we're doing for somebody, but actually, they often just unpick and fall apart, and come back to be a problem. So rather than spending time in this chapter looking at what Paul, some of the intricate conversation and debate, I want us to think about this. Is what I'm doing for the glory of God? And Paul then goes on in this little section, and he says this: do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everyone in every way. For I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. So my other point, why do we do these things? Because we do it for others' safety. Why do we behave in certain ways? We do it for others' sake. We're not doing it to earn the love of God, because he loves us. We're not doing it to get our forgiveness, because he'll forgive us. But we're doing it to bring him glory, and we're doing it for others' safety. As we'll see a little bit later, other people will copy. People will follow you. People will copy you. They will copy your behavior. They will follow you. And so you could say, and as Paul does in this letter, I have freedom to do these things, maybe, but I also have a duty. And Rob shared about that last week. We are free people, but we also have a duty to serve, and a duty to serve others and to serve our God. A little bit earlier on in 1 Corinthians 10, let me just read a little bit from the chapter that I'm covering. Verse 23 and 24. You say, I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say, I'm allowed to do everything, but not everything is beneficial. And that could be beneficial to others. So just because there is a freedom to do something doesn't mean it is the right thing to do. And then he goes on to say, don't be concerned for your own good, but for the good of others. We have a responsibility. So why do we do these things? Why do we respond in certain ways? Because it is for other people's safety. I said I'd tell you a little bit about my holiday. This is a photo of a cliff path on the way from where we were staying to Land's End. Now, unfortunately, this photo doesn't quite give the angles don't quite seem to be as severe as they felt as you walked on this cliff path. But it was quite a big drop off to the left, and it was quite a narrow path, and it wasn't necessarily an easy walk. And I don't know if you can quite see not the far horizon, but there's a sort of a rocky outcrop. That's where the path sort of winds round and goes through. It was quite a scary path to walk on. Now, I was okay. I was fine. Sarah didn't like it. Now, the trouble is this analogy, we had to walk along the path to get to where we were going. There was no other option. But there are times when we may walk along a path and we might say, hey, I'm okay. But other people will follow. And are they safe? Are they able to be safe and secure? We do need to think about what we are doing as we walk on these paths. So part of this whole thing around what Paul is saying here is do it for other people's safety. Be aware of others. We have a duty of care for others. But also be aware for yourself. Be aware for yourself, because even though you may feel comfortable, Paul says the following in verse 12. Sorry, I should have bookmarked so I could go back to it again. Paul says the following, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 12. If you think you are standing strong, be careful not to fall. And as Rob sort of picked up on this passage, the temptations of your life are so no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will allow the temptation to be no more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. But you know what's better? It's not to walk along the dodgy path right on the edge, but it's to step away. And to step away from the difficulties and step away from the temptations. And to make sure, are we staying away from the edge? You see, legalism let me go back to that, is about how much can I get away with. And if it's about how much I can get away with, it's about how close to the edge can I get without falling over. You see, I'm still on the stage. But I am right at the edge of falling, and that would be really embarrassing, wouldn't it? The better thing is not to walk right on the edge and say, hey, I'm okay, I'm within the rules of God, but it's to step way back. And to step back and to create that space and that security for each of us. So we do it for our safety and we do it for other people's safety. But Paul goes on, because he then jumps into 1 Corinthians 11. Just before I go on to this bit, we're all aware, aren't we, that the chapters were put in later. And so some places you think, why did they put a chapter there? And this is one of the examples. Why did they break there and not put this in with the last bit? Because it fits the last bit and then start the next bit. But it's just what's been sectioned up for us. But 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1 is almost a follow-on from what Paul's saying. And you should imitate me just as I imitate Christ. What a statement. What a statement that is. You imitate me just as I imitate Christ. Put it another way, Paul is saying, be like me and you will be like Jesus. Be like me and you will be like Jesus. Bit of honesty. Who thinks they could actually make that statement? To say to someone, be like me and you'll be like Jesus. That's a challenge, isn't it? That's a challenge on a Sunday morning, let alone on a Monday morning when no one's watching and everything's not going quite to plan. Or a Monday night when we're tired and our guard's down. Is a challenge even then. But he's challenging us here. Paul is saying we should be examples to others. Because we need to lead others and help lead others and help them. It should be that as people look at us, they see a glimpse of Jesus. In every moment. Let's go back to the guy that I mentioned. What name did I give him? Fred. He didn't. From what my mum said, he didn't demonstrate Jesus. Or didn't demonstrate her thoughts on what Jesus should be like. Let me put it that way. He probably was a very nice guy. I do apologize to Fred or whoever he was. But do we demonstrate Jesus in all of our situations? Not just on a Sunday morning, but at every point of our lives. It's a bit of a challenge for us to think about and to consider. Do we really demonstrate Jesus in who we are and how we live? It's a bit of a shorter talk today just because I was conscious that it's going to be very, very hot. But let me move towards my final point, which is that we should all be reflectors of God's glory. Because that's effectively what Paul is saying. Paul isn't saying, make sure your behavior is like Jesus and try really hard to be like Jesus. It's not a school test. It's not an exam. How much like Jesus can I be? If I try really, really hard, that's not how it works. Because we are meant to be reflectors of the glory of God. We are meant to reflect Jesus or allow Jesus in us to shine out. It's not about what... Can you see that? It's not about us trying to... Must try harder. We are meant to reflect Jesus. Let me tell you about a little town in Norway. It's pronounced Rjukan. And this little town is somewhere in Norway. It's up in the mountains. And it was developed because there was a waterfall and therefore they had some power and they were able to... some industrial settlements built up from there. But there's one major problem. Because it's further up in the northern hemisphere and it was in quite a deep-sided valley... I don't know if you can quite see this picture, but for 6 months of the year, that's the town at the bottom, and it is in complete darkness. The sun, because the sun is lower, it is in shadow for at least 6 months of the year. And they started to notice a huge amount of depression. Sad seasonal adjustment disorder. They could see the sun up on the mountains. One person had an idea, 1900 and something, And they built a cable car to take people up to the top. And so saying, right, every now and then you can come up into the sun and catch your sun and come back down again. But then someone more recently had another idea. And what they've now done is up on the mountainside, they've installed 3 massive mirrors. And for a part of the day, well, those mirrors track the sun, but for at least minimum of 2 hours, sometimes longer, those mirrors reflect the sunlight down into the town. Now, it doesn't cover the whole town. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But they'd have to have the whole hillside covered, and that would just be causing too many problems. I don't know, again, if you can see, but in the town square, that's at daytime, the mirrors reflect the sun down into the town square. And there is this area where they can go and be in sunlight, or reflected sunlight. One of the articles I read, and if you look on the left-hand photo, you can see the mirrors on the top reflecting the sun down. One of the articles that I read about this, one of the people said this: stepping into the sunlight after hours in permanent shade, I became aware of just how much it shapes our perception of the world. Suddenly, things seem more three-dimensional. I feel transformed into a happier person. Can you see where I'm going with this? Not only for us individually, but stepping into the light of Jesus is a transformational moment. And so I'll come back to that as for you as an individual, for the challenge. Have you stepped into the light of Jesus? But let me just finish by thinking what Paul is saying here. Because Paul is saying we should be reflectors of God's glory. You see, that mirror is not the sun, but the mirror is reflecting the sun into the town. We should be like mirrors, reflecting the glory of God to those people around us. In another letter, Paul writes, in his second letter to the Corinthians, so all of us who have had that veil removed can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. I want us to just meditate or just pause on this verse so we get what God's doing, what our role is. A few things just to mention. All of us. I don't know what your individual story is, but you can reflect the glory of God. It's not about being good. It's not about being better. It's not about being perfect. Those mirrors are simply positioned in the right place. The mirror is pointing to Jesus or to the sun and is able to reflect into the place it needs to be. All of us, so long as we are looking to Jesus, can reflect the glory of God. And you can reflect that glory into the darkness of your workplace or your family or your neighborhood, and you reflect the glory of God and go back to what that person felt like. Because that person in the article, they weren't in the sun, they were in the reflection of the sun. Do people feel better when you're around? Not because of you, but because of Jesus. Are people aware of things and have a better perception of life because you are around? Do people feel transformed into a happier person because you bring the presence of Jesus into that situation? And the answer is yes, because all of us reflect the glory of God. Now, there may be moments where our mirrors get a bit dusty, but if we look to Jesus, and we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, we will reflect the glory of God. And we will bring that transformational presence. Not so people will worship us, but so people will look to Jesus. They'll see Christ in us, and they'll be led or pulled or drawn towards him. So we all can do this. What can we do? We can see and we can reflect the glory of the Lord. Not only can we see God's goodness, but we can reflect it to other people. This is why behavior matters. This is why who we are and how we are matters, because it reflects the glory of God. So what are we reflecting? We're reflecting through our behavior, through our character, through our action, through our words. We've looked at all of those over the last number of months, haven't we? We looked at the Ten Commandments, and we've looked at this letter. But it's not about trying to be a good person, but it's about being people who can reflect the glory. And the beautiful thing is, in this example, the mirror is rigid and it just reflects into one small space. We don't only reflect God here in church, we can reflect him in every moment through our week. As we walk into our workplace, as we walk into our family, we can reflect the glory of God into that moment. Wherever you go, all of the time, you are reflecting the glory of God. And let me end with this. How does it happen? Look at the last bit. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like him as we are changed into his glorious image. You don't need to do anything. It can sometimes feel, when we look at behavior-based passages, I've got to try harder. No. Allow God's Spirit in you to work through you. Now, he might challenge you to change things. He might challenge you to step away from the edge. He might challenge you to change behavior, yes, but it's him in you changing you. It's his Spirit who changes us and makes us being able to reflect his glory. And that's why Paul could say, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And that's why we can all say that. It's not about how good you are. It's about, are you looking at Jesus and are you reflecting Jesus? But I know I've said let me end with this, and I've said that about 3 times, so I do apologize. But let me finally end with this, and I've just stopped my timer, which was really silly, so I've got 3 minutes. Let me finally end with this. Because for some people here, you are currently living in the reflection of someone else. You feel good because someone else is reflecting Christ into your life. Andrea had that difficult passage where it talks about partners and marriages and how actually one partner brings a salvation to another partner. But actually, as good as that is, to stand in that square and feel a little bit of sunshine, what's better? To be in the presence of the sun. And so if you are living your life and you're aware that you need to step from where you are into the presence of Jesus, then my challenge is do that today. What does that mean? It just simply means, Lord, I want to follow you. I want to put you first. I want to say that you're my Lord and my Savior, and I'm sorry for my life and my mistakes, but I trust you, and I will put my hope and my trust fully in you. And maybe it's time to step out of what feels like the reflection of someone else into the presence of God for yourself. Because you can stand in the presence of God. Why? Because everyone is welcome. There's no qualification to stand before Jesus. Simply an open heart and a willingness to put him first. So let me pray. So Jesus, I pray for each one of us. May we be your reflectors. May we bring your presence and your light into the situations. May our actions help others to find you. But ultimately, may what we do bring you glory. And Jesus, I pray for those who need to step into your presence for the first time, who are enjoying being around the people of God. But now is the time to become a child of God. And I pray for courage to make that step and choice. I pray for courage to say, today I will step into the presence of Jesus. and receive his light and receive his love. And so, Holy Spirit, I pray for a conviction alongside my words into people's hearts to know what it is to follow you and to put you first and to become a Christian, a little Christ, a Christ follower. Move in our hearts, Jesus. But I pray for each one of us, may we realize it's not about us, it's about you. May we remember it's got nothing in some respects to do with what we do. It's all about what you've done. And may we receive afresh your love, your grace. And may we be reflectors of your glory in every situation that we walk through this week. Amen.